long time. Alright, so we gotta talk about the CSC200, right? We're on chapter 3.4, talk about the loop. So let's talk about loop in Java. So last time we talked about pseudocode flowchart. So now how do we do that in Java? So they should have three types of loops. Okay. One is for, one is while, and one is do while. Okay. Now let's look at the syntax. So for, and then the condition, right? So it could be int. You initialize it first. I'd like to talk about, let's talk about initialize. Normally when you talk about loop, we want to look at while first. Okay. So let me jump to while a little bit first. Okay. Then we come back. So there are three main things that I want you to look at. If you were looking at the pseudocode, right? So can you pick three things that make sure that the main thing that make the loop terminate? Increment. If you don't increment, it will not terminate, right? So that's one of the three main things, right? Right, three main, right, that you have to have in when you make the loop. So what else? So what is the part that make the loop happens? Evaluate the expressions if it's under, right? So you have to get the Boolean expression, like to return true or false, right? So you have to have that to make the loop, right? And lastly, you have Boolean expression you're evaluating. You have increment. If you never initialize the values, right? What the counter is to increment, then it will never happen too, right? Like example of initialize, we just see that it's like what count equals to 0, right? An expression example is what count under, right? Under we use less than sign under the limit, right? Like initialize has to do both, right? Count 0, limit is 32, something like that, right? So expression is good either true or false. And if you never increment, it will never terminate. So that's why we have to say count equals to count plus 1. So those are three main things when you make the loop, right? Now let's look at syntax in Java. Come back. Let's say I want to start with while first, because it's actually in this exact sequence. You just copy this part, right? So you want to initialize first, right? So initialize, and you just say while, right? In Java, lowercase while Boolean expressions. This is where you can say count less than limit, right? So you put the Boolean expression to evaluate inside the parentheses. And in Java, we start the statement like if you want to print something inside curly braces, right? And then you have to do like the statement go here, right? Whatever you want to perform, right? And then make sure the lastly thing that we have three main things, right? We're still missing one, which is don't forget to increment the counter, otherwise it's going to do the statement forever, right? So that's the syntax for while, right? Now for it's going to be the same, but it happened to put inside one parenthesis like that, right? Those three things in there: initialize and evaluate is it true or false, and then increment, and then close parenthesis, and then start, and you put the statements. So that's pretty much the for in Java. Okay, so now let's look at do while, right? So do while is just like same, but you start with a keyword do and then put the statement in the curly braces, right? So this is where the statement is gonna go, right? And then we need to initialize first, just like while, right? We're gonna fill in those three things. So three main things, features, initialize. Now we're missing the Boolean expressions. This is where the Boolean expression is gonna go. We're gonna say do while with the expressions like that. And also we may end with semicolon. Okay, don't forget that part. Now lastly is what? Increment, which you have to increment inside. So that's the syntax for do while in Java. Okay, now let's start to write the code, right? So let's look at how the code will look like. So let's see, I'm going to go to the location where I have my Java folder. Okay. Okay. I think this is in Windows. This has users, right? And then my user, and then go to my desktop, and then go to CSC200 class. Okay, let me make Java folder. Alright, so we gotta write a program to initialize the count to 0, initialize limit to 32, and print the word go to class for 32 times. Okay, how do we do that, right? So let's do while loop first. The reason say why we want to talk about while first, because it's just matching the standard logic idea to flow, like flowchart, pseudocode, they use while, right? So it's easier to understand and pick up. So we gotta do public class and then public static void main. And then we say initialize, right? Int count equals to 0, and then limit. So this could be, let's use constant. Final int, and syntax for the constant is going to be the name has to be capitalized. Alright, now we just start to do this is the initializing part. You can see, right, those two values. Now we just start to do the Boolean expression inside the while, right? I mean inside parentheses for the while. So Boolean expression, pretty much just the logic right here, right? That give you true or false, right? Boolean, like either true or false, that is Boolean. Then we start the curly braces to do the loop. And what do we want to do? The statements. Like we said, we want to print the word go to CSC200 class, right? Is it done? No. I'm missing something, right? This guy, otherwise it's going to be forever. Okay, then I have to, let's see what happens if it's forever, right? This is pretty much to answer to the question I asked earlier. Let's find out what happens if you forget to do this, right? So we're going to save the program, and we just gonna do the way that we already know, compile it, and then we're gonna run it. Voila. It's more than 32 because I intentionally show you, right? Because always gonna be less than 32, 0, right?
Control C. Control C is the cancel command, so I'll stop doing the application.
See that?
Then just kill it.
This is Control C to stop. So now, think about, imagine that I visit one website, I click one button, and I got the virus. It just make a simple program to loop by occupying my memory or my processor time. Keep doing the work, right? That's an example. So we gotta fix this. We have to increment the count. Every time in Java we can do count plus plus or count equals to count plus 1. So that means increment by 1. So let's try again. Recompile the code, rerun the code. Should be 32 times and done, right? Just stop. So very simple and easy to understand basic loop, right? That's why I said key main thing, put this in your memory. 3 main thing: initialize, right? Set up the Boolean expressions and increment. If you don't increment, it's going to loop forever, right? If your intention to make it loop forever, right? So we've seen the while example. I want to show you how to do for. All right. So let's look at how to do for. So we gotta create for loop program here. All right, so we gotta write the same thing. So we start out with initializing, no, everything inside the for. Initializing int count equals to 0. Now the limit is a constant, so we want to just put inside outside, right? Because it's constant. So final int limit equals to 32. But the key is the counter has to be initialized to 0, and then put the Boolean expression, right, count less than the limit, like count under limit, right, in pseudocode. And then we do increment the count, correct? And then you separate each statement with the semicolon, right? Now we're going to print out the statement. Have too many curly braces. Okay. All right. That's it, right? Let's compile and run. Okay, go to class. I just have to do print line, right, for a new line. But I didn't. Now, last one is do while, right? So let's create the do loop. All right, so we said we want to initialize the limit, okay? And then start with do. Or we want to initialize first, right? Int count according to the syntax, right? Initialize first, right? And then we're gonna do and then closed with the expression. So expression is what? Count less than the limit, right? Now we're still missing the statement that we want to perform, which is go to class. And then start to increment count plus plus. And that's it, right? We're done. So let's recompile this. And rerun this. There you go. So they all pretty much just perform the same, right? For while and do while. But the key thing is for and while pretty much similar, but do while is different. So the difference is you perform the statement before you check the expression. You can see, right? It's a sequence. The rest, they check the expression first before it's performed statement. So meaning that this one will do at least once before it's checked the expressions, right? That's just different. Like it doesn't care either this true or false. Like for example, if I am initialize my count to 32 instead of 0, what happens to that program? Will it print when I use 4? Will it print? Just use the basic logic, right? If we use in while, is it print? Initialize 32. 32 is under 32. Is it under 32? True or false? False. Would it perform the statement when it's false? Never. They never print, right? So if it's never print, then let's check. Right, like I said, if I change, we can try with 4, right? To 32. And now we print. I just try with 4. Now I'm gonna run 4. It wouldn't print anything because the statement is false. But let's look at, it's happened the same with the while, right? So let's try that. So count instead of 0, if I change to 32, now with print, nothing, because false statement, right? Never get to the loop. Lastly, we print for do while. We print. Let's look at the logic. 32, you print first, and then you check. So that's the difference. It's gonna print at least once. See that? And then it perform. So in this case, it's gonna print 1 time. So if you see this question on the test, see that's print 1 time. It's gonna ask you what's the difference. But the result technically give you 32 the same thing, but this one it will print once and then check, because it's performed once. Alright, so I think that's pretty much it. Okay.